Good morning, beasties.
At her year-round home on Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, Geraldine Brooks is getting breakfast for her family's 3 alpacas. The Australian-born author finds a simple joy in caring for her animals and appreciating the beauty around her. Brooks is a convert to Judaism. She says her spirituality is closely tied to the natural world.
I find most of my inspiration in nature. I don't know if there is a literal creator, but I can love creation.
Religious themes and characters have been a hallmark of Brooks's historical novels. Her Pulitzer Prize-winning book, March, centered on the absent clergyman father in Little Women and explored his moral struggles during the Civil War. Her best-selling 2008 novel, People of the Book, created an elaborate interfaith backstory for a 600-year-old Jewish manuscript that survived the Inquisition, the Holocaust, and the Bosnian War. Her new novel, The Secret Chord, focuses on the biblical King David. In all of her work, Brooks says she's drawn to the human quest for meaning.
I'm fascinated by the questions. I don't have any answers, but I love looking at how human beings have grappled with these questions over time.
Brooks grew up in an Irish Catholic family that she describes as pretty churchy.
We went to Catholic school. I was educated by the nuns all the way from kindergarten to the end of high school.
Brooks says she fell away from the church in her teens after becoming disillusioned over issues including the treatment of women and the teachings against birth control.
I was traveling happily as an agnostic. and then I came to the United States for graduate school and fell in love with the man who was going to be my husband, and he was Jewish.
That man, fellow journalist Tony Horowitz, would also become a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. Brooks says he wasn't especially concerned about their religious differences, but she was, especially because the Jewish faith is passed down through mothers.
I thought that given the recent history of the 20th century and what had happened to Jewish families in the Holocaust, that I could make a gesture towards that history by converting to Judaism so that our children would be Jewish.
Brooks says her conversion was more about history than faith, but there are many aspects of Judaism that resonate with her, particularly the emphasis on prayer. She offers frequent prayers to what she describes as no fixed address.
Even though I am not at all sure that anybody is listening, I find that I have this compulsion to offer up little prayers, and it is kind of in the Jewish tradition to do that. You notice something, you express gratitude for it. I also find that if I hear an ambulance siren, I say, please help them. I don't know who I'm saying it to, but I feel like moved in my soul to say it.
Early in her career, Brooks was a foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, covering war zones in the Middle East and the Balkans. She's also a breast cancer survivor of more than 10 years. She says both experiences have heightened her appreciation for being in the moment.
We're always running our minds on the next thing and getting and spending and power plays and all the nonsense that we fill our days with. So I think also having a potentially life-threatening illness and getting out of it in one piece is something that helps you be more appreciative and to just take every day as a gift.
Brooks and Horowitz have 2 sons, Nathaniel and Bizayo, who was adopted from Ethiopia. The family is a fixture in the small, year-round Martha's Vineyard community. Brooks can be found buying dairy products at their neighbor's farm stand or visiting the stable which houses her beloved horse.
Hi, gorgeous girl. Gorgeous girl.
The family attends the Martha's Vineyard Hebrew Center, the only synagogue on the island. Brooks praises the leadership of its rabbi, Karen Breutman.
We just have the one little shul. It's a very small community, so it has to embrace a lot of diverse opinions. And I think she's really a genius at holding this diversity together in a really exemplary way.
Brooks says she consulted Breitman while writing her novel about David, especially when it came to conveying what she calls the austere beauty of the biblical Hebrew.
I didn't want it to sound like an English text from that period. I wanted it to have more of the resonance of the Hebrew, which can be very poetic, but also can be extremely blunt.
Brooks's interest in David was ignited years ago when her oldest son told her he wanted to play the harp. That got her thinking about the boy harpist in Scripture. She started rereading his story.
And I'm thinking, whoa, this is very Game of Thrones.
She says she was fascinated by David's loves and battles and all the conspiracies over succession.
And so to try and use imaginative empathy to fill in the gaps that Scripture leaves became such an intriguing challenge to me. And also, I took a lot of consolation in that I'm not the first to take this on.
In the Secret Chord, David's story is told through the eyes of the prophet Nathan, who often castigates the king. Among Brooks's research sources were the writings of the late Jewish theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel.
What I really loved about researching this book was reading Heschel on the Hebrew prophets. He says, you know, these are some of the most confounding and troublesome men who ever lived. And I've always been attracted to brave idealists, the people who take the human condition, the ethical framework, and push it a bit further.
Some biblical scholars have speculated about the close friendship between David and Jonathan, or Jonathan, the son of Israel's King Saul. In Brooks's telling, the two have a sexual relationship.
I think everybody interprets Scripture according to their own times, and I really feel an honest reading of the passages relating to how their souls were knit together, and the extraordinary outpouring of emotion in the lament for Jonathan that David writes, called the Song of the Bow, when he says, "Your love was greater to me than the love of any woman." And this is a guy who's loved a lot of women.
Brooks's David is a complicated man. She says that's his appeal.
He is a flawed character, but he's a flawed character in Scripture. And he's the first to admit his flaws. And that's one of the things that draws me to him, because so many powerful men, particularly, are flawed. The story of David isn't date stamped, and it's because he does embody the dark and the light of the human condition that I think is one of the reasons that we're pulled back to the story time and time again.
Is there a sequel in the works about Solomon?
Well, that's an interesting idea. There's certainly a lot to say about Solomon, and the story, I do leave the story at a pretty important crux. So who knows? We'll see if Nathan speaks to me again.
Whatever the topic of her next historical novel, chances are good it too will have religious themes.
If you're going to write about the past, you can't ignore faith, because faith was, in many ways, the defining characteristic of so many lives in the past. So good luck not writing about it.
I'm Kim Lawton on Martha's Vineyard.